everybody, I'm Colleen, and this is the Food Explorer podcast, and I'm with my amazing friend today, Malcolm Saunders.
Right on.
He is from the Light Cellar in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. He owns an amazing store, and we're going to talk all about his store, his community here, the products that he makes, and kind of a bit of everything. And I joked with Malcolm earlier, I said, you're going to be on more than once.
All right.
Yeah, you're going to be on many times. So Malcolm, you started this store a long time ago, but give me a bit of, how did you get into what you're doing now, which is, superfoods, creating foods, teaching classes? Where did it all begin?
Oh, totally. Okay. Well, what I do is I help people find and learn how to craft their own food and medicine. And that was 100% born out of my own journey, trying to figure it out for myself.
It's hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the healer's path, isn't it? Like so many people that are, on the path in any capacity to help others. It started with themselves going like, oh, something's not right? Either it was like an official diagnosis or they just didn't feel well. They knew something was off. Mine was a little bit self-inflicted.
Okay, I need to hear about what you self-inflicted on yourself.
All right, okay. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unlike any other. I was coming home from school, and I've been thinking about this for quite a while. I was a young, 16-year-old idealist, and Mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She's Scottish, so the type of meals that she made were meat and potatoes. And my brother and I, we love junk food, fast food, that kind of stuff, which she obliged us, and we appreciated at that time.
Yes.
And but I've been thinking about this shift, this change. So I come in, I says, Mom, I gotta become a vegetarian.
And your Scottish mom did what?
She says, you're still gonna eat this supper, aren't you?
Yeah.
And
yes.
It actually turned into a bit of a coming of age speech, she was going through a divorce at the time, and she says, Malcolm, I support you, but I can't help you.
Yeah.
She was just emotionally kind of really engaged with that, and she had no idea how to be a vegetarian.
No.
Turns out I didn't either.
No. And it's so funny because of all the friends that I've spoken to that, become vegetarian or become vegan, it's a process.
Oh, it really is.
And sometimes, I went cold turkey vegan.
Yeah, me too.
I had to, though. I was sick. I'd moved to Vegas.
Oh.
So some people know this. I was living in Denmark, healthy food, moved to Vegas, unhealthy food, everything. The Heart Attack Grill is in Vegas for a reason. And I, out of necessity, switched overnight.
Right.
But for you, so with your gradual switch,
it was overnight.
Oh, you were overnight.
Yeah.
Your mom was gradual.
Yeah, well, I went from meat, potatoes, and junk food to just potatoes and junk food.
We call those, the junk food vegans, vegetarians.
Totally,
yeah.
I mean, to say, and spoiler alert, I'm not a vegetarian anymore.
Yeah, I'm not a vegan anymore.
Yeah.
This is confession time.
Yeah, all right. Just before we kind of lead people too far down the path here, let's get that clear. So, I mean, it took me almost 15 years to actually come out of that. But that's what started my journey. Had nothing to do with food, nutrition. It was purely this kind of environmental aspirations, right?
Yeah.
And you can see the documentaries. There's this real belief system that, vegetarian will help save the planet. And, to me, I was raised in nature, I mean, not physically, but that was kind of our church. That was our connection, hiking and biking and, just being outside all the time. Absolutely loved it. And I think most of us in the kind of modern world, if we have any connection to nature, we kind of feel that ecological wound, right? You see, habitat species disappearing. I mean, I'm not one for the climate change narrative. I think there's truth to it, kind of like the vegetarian. There's truth to it, but it's only one side of the story. And as a 16-year-old, it's like, what can I do, right? So I was like, okay, I'll become vegetarian, and that actually just woke me up to the reality of food.
Yes.
My kind of orientation of food at that time was whatever was quick, easy, and tastes good. My culinary abilities at the time was already knew how to make Pop-Tarts, grilled cheese, and microwave pizza.
Yeah.
My favorite meal of the day were breakfast cereals, and they didn't need to be eaten for breakfast, like lunch, dinner, snacks in between.
Breakfast is an all-day food. My grandpa, when it used to be, so my grandpa was originally, his whole family was from Ireland.
Yeah.
And when all the grandkids were at the house, my grandpa would get up early with the grandkids and feed us corn pops with ice cream.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Breakfast of champions right there.
I love corn pops. Pops and Fruit Loops and Frosted Flakes, those kinds of things. But it didn't serve me well. So in that shift, like instantly, you're 16, supposed to have all your youth, all your energy. I could barely make it through a day. Like just energy slumps, blood sugar issues would crash. And so I was like, okay, there's obviously some to this food piece. And I was really committed to the ideology of it. And so that's what started me on the rabbit hole. And then the first thing you get into is this idea of like whole foods. Oh yeah, if you want to be healthier, prepare things from scratch yourself. You'll probably notice a theme, like when I get into something, I really get into it.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. I know this.
So, okay, whole foods, right?
Yes.
So literally for a number of years, I didn't eat anything that I had not personally prepared myself from scratch or someone I knew had prepared. I mean, I didn't even go to restaurants to eat. Well, there was one thing.
A guilty pleasure.
A guilty pleasure.
What was it?
Can you imagine? You can guess.
Oh, chocolate.
Of course.
Chocolate.
I didn't think I'd give that out now, did you?
No way.
There it was. Holier than thou, food puritan. I don't need white flour. I don't need white sugar. But I ate candy bars.
Yes.
Because I didn't know that you could make it yourself, that you could upgrade that. So that came later in my journey.
Yeah.
But man, I used to try everything from scratch, breads and salad dressings and soups and all that stuff. So I really cut my teeth, culinary wise, just trying to figure it out. And I had a period in my life where I was kind of going from different yoga to meditation centers. I was sitting and serving, and oftentimes my serving, just contributing to the community, would be in the kitchen or in the garden. So I got a lot of skills there, and kind of the vegetarian type cuisine. I started really trying to research nutrition because I needed to feel good. And improvements were made, but I kept going further down the rabbit hole. So you mentioned vegan. Yes, I went vegan too.
Yes,
I went raw vegan. For a number of years, and just totally committed to this ideology. But more than a decade into it, I just had to. It was like, if I just cleanse a little more, if I just do this, do that. I never actually quite got there.
Yeah.
To that state of health that I was, I improved for sure. I learned a ton, made some great stuff, but I just had to be really honest with myself that, I'm not as vital as I know I should be.
Yes.
Or even just looking at somebody else or looking at myself in the mirror, just like, So there was a big kind of humbling, and I just had to put all that aside.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd say meat rots in your gut and blah, blah, blah. I was a really intense vegan. I don't know about you, but
I was not I'm just vegan over here quietly. But I remember, so Malcolm had actually brought a few people in for a couple workshops. And one of them was Daniel Vitalis years and years ago.
Yeah,
and I had signed up for the workshop. And Malcolm private messaged me. He's like, this is not going to be a vegan workshop, right? Because he knew at the time I was still vegan. I was like, it's okay, Malcolm. I just want to meet him.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because, when you meet somebody in person and they're larger than life on the screen and then you meet them.
Yeah.
And Daniel Vitalis is very stocky and short.
Quite short. Yeah, for sure.
And so, but it was funny because at that point, I was still vegan for many, many years after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with you and having the store, it made it easier for me because this was a place I could come and get all the things that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so when you started the Light Cellar, you were first in the basement, the garage. Where were you at?
We were actually out of my mother-in-law's basement.
Okay. Yeah. And then from there, you opened a store.
Well, actually, no. Then we got our own place.
Oh, you had your own, another basement.
Yeah, another basement. So we lived upstairs and had our little, because Laura was doing colonics at the time.
Okay.
And I was doing I was making chocolate, I was teaching classes, I was bringing in foods and just very simply kind of dividing up the bulk and sharing it around. So we joked it was kind of like a feed 'em and clean 'em business.
Yeah. Nice. And it was, it was funny because I had been living in the States, so I had access to Whole Foods, hole in your wallet, whole paycheck, whatever you want to call it. But it was so easy to find amazing Whole Foods, superfoods, and anything you wanted.
Yeah.
Coming back to Canada, it was funny because I found that community. I found it with you, and then I was living in Canmore, and I found it with a couple of people in Canmore. So I was able to kind of stay in that community.
Right. Yeah.
But one of the things that I think with your store that you really helped build was the community for people
For sure.
to come and learn
Yeah.
how do I make sauerkraut? How do I make bread?
Yeah.
Because when people want to make this health journey,
Yeah.
they don't know how to do these things.
No.
It's like a lost art. Like my dad's parents knew how to do that, but my dad's generation didn't.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's really been lost.
Yes.
Yeah, and all we're supported with, kind of on a societal level is the food guide, counter food guide. Like, but how
so helpful.
Yeah, in grade 2,
pyramid.
Yeah, and honestly, my personal beliefs is that we shouldn't be relying on the government to teach us how to eat. No. And we shouldn't be relying on industry and, that kind of thing. So we've kind of lost our way. I think culture is, ancestral is the best way, but there are those gaps. So we're all kind of left figuring it out.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. I've traveled a lot and other countries have a food culture.
Right.
A very specific food culture. Like if you go to Verona in Italy, and then you go to Siena in Italy, they're eating different things and they're very specific and theirs is the best.
Yeah.
And it's variations on anything. But in Canada, we're a big old mishmash of foods and cultures. And so when you look at like the foods that you love the best, like think of the stuff that you love the best now.
Right.
So what category does that fall into?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely, so I try not to give myself any labels. I learned a ton, from being such an intense, like, I'm this, I'll never do this.
Thou shalt.
Yeah. So I'm much more of like a flexitarian, like opportunivore, omnivore. I still have very high standards, but I'm just not intense about it. And so I love, we talk about the 4 food groups. There's actually 4 food groups that humans eat.
Okay.
All around the world throughout time. And this is one of those things that I learned from Danny Vitalis. So you look at any culture around the world, any time in history, it's actually based on 4 food groups.
Okay.
So plants, pretty obvious, right? Nuts, seeds, grains, fruits, vegetables, seaweeds.
I love seaweed.
Yeah.
I love seaweed so much.
There's such a diversity. So, when I first went vegetarian, I was more carbitarian, right?
Oh, well, carbs are, come on, carbs are delicious.
But the thing is, I wasn't actually eating vegetables, right?
No, they're not really energetically the best.
So becoming vegetarian, really forced me to explore the full offering of the plant kingdom. So I'm grateful for that. Animal foods is another food group. And what I love about, these 4 food groups, it doesn't tell you what to eat, when to eat, or how much to eat. That's the personal journey. So animal foods, again, any culture around the world, and this is another thing that Daniel shared. I don't know if you were there. It's like, how many of you have been vegetarian?
Yes.
Like 1 year. Okay, quite a few heads. Okay, 5 years. 10 years. 20? Nope, nobody. Right?
And then there's me in the front row. I was very quiet.
So just the kind of longevity of that. And the point I bring up is there's been no culture that has excluded animal foods,
Exclusively.
Yeah. There's always some element. So sure, that could be beef, that could be chicken, that could be pork, it could be any type of meat, it could be the eggs, it could be the milk, it even includes insects.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a role that animal foods play, and each one of these 4 food groups offers nutrients that the other doesn't.
Yes.
And if there is some overlap, then there's different quantities, whatever. So plants, animals, that's really where we're going to get our macronutrients. Third one is bacteria. So those are fermented foods. Every single culture around the world ferments its own food. And then fungi is the 4th. And utilizing all the way from single-celled yeast within that kingdom to what we call the large, medicinal mushrooms, the polypores, and everything in between. So I primarily eat, I'm more animal-based now in terms of what I eat. I'm not carnivore. I'm not exclusive. It's just the majority of my calories come from animal foods, and then I eat a lot of plant foods. I drink them as teas, to me, plants, they're herbs, they have a medicinal and nutritive role to play. And then, of course, bacteria and fungi, mushrooms, but then each of those can be involved in fermentation of plant and animal foods.
Absolutely.
So,
speaking of fermentation, I teach a lot of classes. So I do a lot of tasting events, workshops. And my primary vehicle to do those is chocolate. And it is always interesting because I pose the question,
Yeah.
do you know what foods are fermented? And people are like, oh, sauerkraut
And wine.
and wine. And I'm like, chocolate.
Yeah.
Chocolate's fermented. And it always is mind-blowing to them. There's a real disconnect because I think
totally.
that people don't get, it's beer and wine and bread and kimchi and chocolate.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, all the best foods are fermented. That's just my opinion.
For sure.
But you now at the Light Cellar, and since the beginning of time, the Light Cellar, you make your own chocolate.
Yeah, totally. And that point that you made, chocolate was one of the foods I loved the most, and I didn't give up in that really strict intensity, and had the biggest disconnect with, just like everybody else. So to me, I naturally narrowed in on that as something to really shift that for myself and for others. What is the whole food source of chocolate? Well, it's cacao. Oh, well, cacao's fermented, right? It became this whole rabbit hole, and it was really exciting to learn about and go to its depths. And yeah, as you mentioned, you and I have a very similar path that we make stuff. We've been on our own journey, but really we're so much about teaching and education.
Yeah.
And so that was, to me, actually having a store was more accidental. I actually set out to teach. I knew I didn't want to be a one-on-one practitioner. I didn't want to be a nutritionist in that sense. I was much more about empowering people, on their own journey. So teaching classes, right? And expanding perceptions about food and nutrition, right? Just okay, we've kind of existed in this kind of narrow paradigm that's not serving us because that generational gap that we talked about, let's break that open. Let's go back to what's real, what's true, authentic. And I also love making food. So it was making and teaching, and then the kind of providing. You nailed it exactly, same as you. I lived in the States as well, came back to Calgary and was like, well, where is it, all this stuff, So I started importing it for myself because I knew I had the connections. And, just as one example, so there was one store in Calgary when I moved back, because I was born and raised here, but leaving ever since I could. Yeah. So you need to do that. Grass is always greener, but, returning here, raising a family, that kind of thing. There was one store in town that sold cacao powder for $55 a pound.
Whoa, that's today's prices.
Right? Yeah. We were talking almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I can buy that for 10, Yeah. So what did I do? I sold it for 54. No, I didn't. I sold it for 12. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't even cover my shipping. I didn't even cover, So there was a learning in terms of business. But yeah, that's kind of how it started, bringing it for myself, providing that access to the community. And then what do you do with it? How do you use cacao? How do you use gojis? These types of things, bringing it into your life. And then, I don't know, I just happened to have some here, just had an order, that kind of thing. And then 2 weeks later, people are like, well, I'm out. Yeah. You got any more? And I'm
you got the stuff.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I guess so. Come on by, And at some point, word of mouth for that was kind of hindered because the people would be like, I love everything that you're doing. You're off. I'm trying to tell my friends, but they think it's kind of weird. You're like my dealer, Yes. I got to go to your house around the back, knock twice,
Yes.
So then after it was almost 3 years, 2.5 or so, that we made the decision, my wife and I, to okay, maybe we should formalize this. Maybe we should get a proper retail space, because though we were open kind of on every Sunday, I'd have chocolate made, I might teach a class, people could come by, pick up ingredients. It was suddenly Wednesday afternoon. Oh, I'm just in the neighborhood, can I come on by? Yeah. And so okay, maybe this is our direction we're going to take here. We ended up renting a space along the old main street of Bowness here in Calgary. And we were open Thursday to Sunday, just 4 days a week. In that first year, I had one employee, and he would actually just sit out front and read books till someone would come in. And I'd be busy in the back, bagging things or doing this, making kraut, that kind of thing. And that was the first year. And that's just kind of how it's grown.
Yeah. Well, and I ended up, I don't know if you know this, you helped me start my business.
Okay. Well, that's
because I was living in Canmore and I was working with New Roots, which they're no longer. Oh. And so I was working with her, and she taught me a chocolate making class, which she had taken from you.
Yeah.
And I had gone home. I made all this chocolate. I came back the next day, and she's like, "I taught you none of this. I don't even know where this came from." I made like
a gift.
filled chocolates.
Yeah.
And so I started working for her. And then I was like, well, I can't buy this retail. And I contacted you, and you were kind enough, even though I wasn't like an official business. You helped me out with ingredients, and you were like, I can't give you like wholesale because we don't really do wholesale at that point, because you were just brand new as well.
Yeah.
But you were able to give me kind of a bit of a discount so that I was able to start my business. And from there, it was like my business grew and grew and grew into what it is now, which is 100% different than when I started. Like,
well,
it's
naturally,
just, it's like it's been a natural progression, and we've gone more into, you know, that nostalgia chocolate. You know, I want people to have peanuts and caramel and chocolate. Totally. That's what I want.
Soul food. You know?
Yes. I want people to eat the nice, delicious things.
Yeah.
But with that, I also came and I took quite a few classes from you.
Yeah.
Because there was things like making sauerkraut. I love sauerkraut. Like I said, I love fermented foods. And I was so scared. And I think this is kind of almost a theme with people. They're scared they're going to mess it up.
Right.
They're scared they're going to make it wrong. They're scared that something's going to grow on top.
Yeah.
You know, but now it's like at home, I have a SCOBY this big. He is a fat boy, and I feed him good food.
Yeah.
And a SCOBY is what you make kombucha out of.
Yeah.
So I do kombucha at home. But can you speak a little bit about sort of that, getting people out of that fear to try?
For sure.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to take two angles there. One on kind of like the food level, and then the other one on the business level. Because that to me is a big part of what I have always been doing, but it's taking more of a kind of a center stage, and at some point I see myself speaking more about business than I do nutrition.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of moving up. But anyways, you're absolutely right. I mean, we live in this kind of bacteria-phobic culture.
Yeah.
Right. For the longest time, it's just been a war on bacteria. You know, food manufacturing, especially on an industrial scale, like the microbe, we got to kill it, we got to can it, we got to, you know, for that long shelf life. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, we took a wrong turn with our diet. And, you know, no fault of our parents or their parents, like, they didn't know, right? They had a beautiful foundation of that, you know, ancestral, cultural heritage of their diet. And then the world began to change, right? Like it was convenient. It's like, wow, like we can have canned food, we can have packaged food, we can have all this wonderful stuff. I watched my grandparents go through it from a very like beautiful, you know, garden-centric, whole food diet. I mean, they lived through World War II, that kind of a thing. And it was their son who, you know, from being a bachelor and whatever, it started to influence them to like, but you can just buy this pre-made pizza and throw it in the microwave, you know, like
it's easy.
And you know, they didn't know what would happen. So, you know, we got to be grateful that they showed the way of not what to do, you know, like, so it's reclaiming these old skills that are inherently human to us, like fermenting our own food.
Yeah.
And there is that kind of fear. And that's why like a class, you know, having someone, it's like, you can read about it. You can even watch a video about it. But if you can have somebody there in person, just like, no, it's all good, right? You know that little white stuff you get on top? That's called canned yeast, you know? Like,
don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, and people, you know, when you say to people, you know, I could source the air right now for yeast and make bread. People are like,
what?
That's so gross. And you're like, how do you think bread gets made? Like, how do you think starters start?
Yeah.
And so it is a good education. Whenever I do classes, I'm always very education first, because I want people to feel empowered
for sure
to go home and do, you know. And I loved when I did one of the sauerkraut classes with you, because we made like seaweed sauerkraut.
Yeah.
We did a beet sauerkraut. I think we did 3 different types of sauerkraut. And then we got to come back after a couple of weeks of fermenting, and it was all packaged up, and we got to take our jars with us.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, amazing. Like, I absolutely love that. And so I was looking at the classes that you have coming up, and you've got your foraging.
Yeah.
So tell me about that, because that's like a whole another level of awesome.
Yeah. And a whole other level of like, are you sure I can eat that?
Yeah.
We've all been raised with like, we're afraid of what's out in the wild, you know. And one of the biggest shifts that I had was wild water.
Oh yeah.
If you talk about like a fear in our society, like, oh, you know, can't touch the water, don't drink the water.
I still get water from the spring in Canmore.
Yeah.
I know where the spring is. If you need to know, I'll tell you.
Yeah. It'll change your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like just the level of quality. I mean, you could drink a gallon of that, like jump up and down, and it's like, it's not jiggling in your stomach. It's like just straight in, and it feels so good. I mean, we've all had that experience of like carrot out of the ground, apple off the tree, strawberry off the plant, right? Like the flavor of the homegrown, that fresh it's undeniable, and it forms memories. Like as a kid, right? Like, oh, grandma's house, the tomatoes off her vine. Like it's the same thing with spring water, right? Like water right out of the earth, like. Oh man, amazing. Yeah, there's such a fear. So yeah, that kind of gentle guidance. And so what I'm really, really big on now is wildcrafting, you know, like foraging for food and medicine. It absolutely amazes me, you know, if you think about the indigenous people of this land, or literally, again, any land, you know, where people lived, indigenous just means to be of a place, right? So whether that's in Italy or Scotland or Africa, South America, you know, once upon a time, there were no grocery stores, there were no pharmacies, right? Yes. And yet they knew how to thrive. They knew how to utilize what the land offered. And that totally fascinates me. And not only does it bring me closer to nature, you know, that thread through my life, but it's also feeding me, it's nourishing me. It's like, you know, an alternative to what's available within our society. And so showing people, even in the middle of winter, right? It's like, oh, well, you can't forage in the winter. Yeah, you can forage in the winter.
Yes.
You know? Like,
well, the plants have a cycle.
Yeah.
And I think like even in Edmonton, we have the high bush cranberries, high bush cranberries.
Yeah.
And, you know, people will go to the river valley and they will forage for these rose hips and all sorts of stuff. And you'll see people like, I'll be walking along the trail and I'll see somebody foraging, but you'll see other people like, oh, what are they doing?
Right.
Yeah. You know, it's dangerous. But I mean, when we think about our foods, they were originally foraged, you know, like you have a cacao pod here. Let's just bring this little cacao pod out. Like, if we look at this, who looked at the tree and went, chocolate is in there. Inside this is chocolate, right?
Yeah.
And so it's that learning. And I think when you take people on those foraging, because I've done a couple, what's his name? He wrote a bunch of mushroom books.
Oh, Robert Rogers.
I've gone on foraging with him, and Blaine Andrusick, I've gone on foraging with him. And, you know, it was funny because the one I did with Blaine, we stayed in like this little like 10 foot by 10 foot area because he was like, oh, here and here and here and here. And we didn't even have to move anywhere.
I know. Yeah. This is funny. When you call it a plant walk, people expect, oh, it's going to be a hike. It's like, no, we'll be lucky if we get past the parking lot because there's going to be so many plants that will just like, oh, this.
Yes.
There's an abundance at our feet.
There's an abundance.
Yeah.
What's the little yellow flower you gave me once and you just like instantly start drooling?
Oh, that's a spillanthus.
Yeah, it is very fun to eat, but you're just like, I'm drooling.
Yeah, that's another name for it is the toothache plant.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's actually related to echinacea, so it's an immunostimulant. It helps boost the immune system, and that salivation is good for a number of things. So it's also really good for digestion. But if anybody has like, you know, tooth issues or, you know, whatever it is, that saliva is very cleansing. It's very healing, and it's also numbing as well too. So,
I know. Every time I see it now, I just look at it and I just start giggling.
Yeah, it's a little like party trick.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
So you did a perfect segue, immune system. So we're moving into, it annoys me when people call it cold and flu season. It's not a season. It's not a season. You didn't take care of yourself. I'm so judgmental. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But
well, a lot happens, right?
Like, a lot happens.
Yeah, there is that seasonal shift. Like it's starting to get cooler. Days are getting shorter. People are now suddenly inside. They're back into routine. Like stress goes up. They're indoors. Yeah, maybe they're not, you know, eating as well as they were. They're trying to like, you know, catch up to school or work or whatever. The stress overwhelms them, and we're spending more time inside with like recycled, you know, heated air. There's all kinds of things that can make us more susceptible. And you're right. So this time of year, we need to do things that can support that transition.
So a couple of things that you have in the store, like if somebody was to come in right now and be like, oh, I'm starting to feel like the energy's low. What are a couple of things that you would suggest to them to say, this might help with your energy levels, boost your immunity.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, this is a nice little segue.
Perfect.
For something that's actually wild forage. So this is what I call, it's a spruce syrup. And so this is all wild foraged. Spruce is the most common conifer, at least within the cities, and arguably maybe even in the entire province. We got primarily spruce and pine. Both of them can work in the same way. Many benefits and properties. It's funny, over the last few years through COVID, there was kind of this circulation around like pine. People like, oh, you got to get on the pine. And
all right,
yeah,
heard it. Get on the pine.
So there's phone calls like, "You guys got any pine?" I'm like, "Have you looked outside? I bet you might have one in your backyard."
Right.
But I get it. People don't know what it looks like or what to do with it.
Yes.
But the pine needles, the spruce needles, are high in what's called shikimic acid. Shikimic acid is a compound that is the key ingredient in the world's #1 selling flu medication, called Tamiflu.
Okay.
Now, it's not sourced from conifers. Originally, it was sourced from star anise.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which contains like 10 to 12% shikimic acid. Pines are in like kind of the 2 to 3 to 4%. So it's still there, still good, still valuable, plays a role. I think Tamiflu is now like synthetically derived. But it helps inhibit respiratory viruses.
Right.
It's good for coughs and colds, like in the case of like spruce and pine. Mm-hmm. So you can gather those needles, which they're evergreen, they're available year round, they're high in vitamin C. We know that vitamin C, supports immunity. The shikimic acid, antiviral. It also has kind of, it can help relieve congestion. And when you harvest it and prepare it right, it tastes amazing. So I'm going to give you a little taste here.
Absolutely.
Give it a try.
I do love a good tincture.
Kind of fill up a little dropper there. Sprucey.
Thank you. I love this. So you make tinctures, hydrosols, all of that here.
All that stuff here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm buying some fire starter before I leave.
Yeah. So that's been a big part. You mentioned about the teaching. It's, I love to make things. I love to go forage and like turn it into medicine.
This is so good.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, I love it.
I can teach you how to make that. That's done 4 different ways with the spruce. So I make a tea from it, I make a tincture from it, I extract it in honey, and then also do a hydrosol. So all 4 of those are combined together.
And just explain in layman's terms, hydrosol. So for people to understand what that is.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so hydrosol, as the name suggests, hydro, water, sol, solution. This is actually how essential oils are made. So it's a distillation process where basically, you can create a tea and then capture the steam, or you can just boil water and then the steam passes through plant material. And as it does, it pulls and extracts all the kind of volatile compounds, anything kind of like water soluble. So it's not going to pick up the fiber. It's not going to pick up the minerals. Like it'll just anything kind of that light, aromatic, that delicate. It's when you walk into a forest and you go, oh, I feel so good. I feel uplifted. I feel, like.
I know. This smells like a forest.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So to me, like that's internal forest bathing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It tastes, and trust me, some things you're like, oh, does it taste good? This tastes amazing. I wouldn't lie to you because I'm going to do a segment eventually called Things I Wish I'd Never Put in My Mouth, but this is not one of them.
Okay, so here's a hydrosol. So there's a steam distillation of pine, cedar, hemlock, spruce, and fir. Nice. And so this is one of the ways you can use it. Hydrosols can be used all kinds of ways. So when they make a hydrosol, and what will they do? They'll typically skim the essential oils off the top, put them in a little bottle. That's your essential oil. That's how those things are prepared. There's all this water that's left over, which is incredibly valuable and still beautiful in its own right. Well, I leave all the essential oils plus the aromatic waters, and let's just spray that.
Oh.
So think of it like a smokeless smudge, or like a clearing, cleansing, uplifting. It's like bringing the forest in, right? It's like forest phasing in the office,
nice. And what's the name of this product here?
This one's called Forest Essence.
Forest Essence.
Yeah.
Forest Essence.
But
It smells amazing.
Rose hydrosol, lavender hydrosol, holy basil, Labrador. I mean, all kinds. And this one I would just maybe use more kind of aromatically. Yeah. In that sense. Cedar, there's very few plants that you'd want to be like mindful of. because of certain compounds. You wouldn't want to consume a lot of cedar. It
Yes.
can become toxic. So we don't recommend consuming that internally, but all the rest, many of them you can absolutely use internally, like rose. In a lot of East Indian or Middle Eastern cuisine, like the rose water, it's actually a hydrosol they're using, so you can put it in chocolate. You can put it in your elixirs.
We love chocolate.
And then the other beautiful thing, so it's internally, aromatically, but then also topically. So rose water is an example, and you mentioned Blaine Andrewsik, literally every day for I don't know how many decades that man has sprayed rose water in his face. He's barely a wrinkle,
he does look very young. I'm gonna go get some rose water.
And that's because it's a toner. It's tonifying. It's astringent. It helps tighten. So you're in the shower, your pores open up. It's nice and hot. You're feeling good. You get out, you start to dry off. Like you instantly put some rose on your face or your skin, and it tightens it back up, right? Versus like kind of staying open and sagging. So it's a nice little toner that way. It's also very good, and we're talking rose specifically, for any kind of redness, like inflammation, heat. It's very cooling that way. So there's so many benefits to each of the plants that you can apply, topically. And most importantly, like hydrosols, when they're true hydrosols, they actually have an acidic pH. Because one could argue, well, why don't I just add essential oils into water and I'll shake it up? You get a nice aromatic spray. Nothing wrong with that. But with the hydrosols, what makes them so good for skincare is they're slightly acidic. Well, they can all the way beat some are like 4 something, 5 something pH in that range. What's our skin?
4.5?
It's acidic, right? The acid mantle.
Yeah.
So where a lot of soaps, and I'm not saying don't use soap, but it strips that acidity. They're alkalizing, and this is a great way to kind of reset that acid mantle as one of its benefits. So hydrosols are awesome. I totally love them.
Well, and our skin is our biggest organ, and especially this, as we're moving into the seasonal change, going into winter. So we're in North America right now, so we're going into winter. I realize other places are going into their summer. But for us, it's that cozy hunker down. We have our tea this morning. We're enjoying tea. Now, 2 things that I want to sort of finish off with, because the store has everything that you could need to, start your own fermenting, learn how to do it, come in and get some amazing superfoods. You've actually written 2 books that I want to talk about because at the Light Cellar, one of the things that Malcolm has is the Elixir Bar downstairs. So this is where you can come and you can get an elixir. So we're going to define elixir in a second, but I'm just going to say, over the years, I love how the elixirs have, kind of grown and expanded. And you've got, sort of your standard menu, your seasonal menu for your elixirs. And I am going to be getting one before I leave today. But they're so well crafted.
Oh, thanks.
And I think that when people start out with superfoods, they're like, I'm adding 30 things to my drink. Don't do that. It's going to be mud. But you wrote this beautiful book here. Let's grab that. So I have this book. It's called Elixir Life, and I'll show you guys some pictures later. And this is the thing I love about this book. Simple to use recipes that taste delicious, where you can use multiple ingredients for multiple recipes.
For sure.
So,
and you can switch it out based upon, what you have available. Like the key when I think about crafting anything, be it chocolate, be it elixir, I think kind of my key to what I call alchemy is flavor, function, feeling. So flavor is pretty obvious. You got to have that flavor. That's going to be appealing, that you're going to enjoy. And you can think more generally, okay, flavor, do I want something kind of mint? Do I want more chocolate? Or am I working with coffee? Where on the flavor spectrum, and that can help inform the other ingredients that you're going to add. Function. What's going on today, right? Like, okay, well, I just finished this intense conference for 3 days. I was up late last night. I'm driving home to Edmonton, function. I need to be alert. I'm going to be on the road, okay, what ingredients do I have that can go into this elixir? Feeling, well, I'm feeling a little run down. I just need a little bit more energy, whatever it is. Maybe it's a date night, I want to feel like in the mood, whatever, right? So again, it informs what you're going to add to your drink, so you can really customize these drinks. And the definition of an elixir that I have is an alchemical vehicle for the delivery of food and medicine. Yeah, we're back to that old standard that food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food. Well, how do we actually practically do that? You know, like elixirs are one way to do that. And I've completely changed my food philosophy. I've evolved, you know, as we know, as we've been sharing in this journey. And even though we mentioned you and I, like we went overnight, we went hardcore, right? That's not what I recommend. You know, like I recommend the adding in and the upgrading. You know, and that was Dave Wolf was a big influence on that, right? Of just like, you don't need to turn your life upside down, like, because that's very hard, that's very stressful, and a lot of people can't. It doesn't fit into what they're doing. So, you know, do what you do, add in stuff, right? Thinking about those four kingdoms, okay, exploring the plant kingdom and all its diversity. What different herbs could you add in? Animal foods, right? Upgrading the quality. If we're just eating, you know, regular conventional, you know, grocery store chicken, if one can make the shift, okay, you're going to source out a local farmer, you know, get that quality up. You've never had organ meats? Okay, we're going to like slowly add those in the ways that we can. Ferments, okay, we're just going to like put a little on our plates and we're going to try and source the best quality we can. So that's the adding in, the upgrading, and elixirs are an easy thing to do because you can, you know, part of that morning routine. Everyone's got their coffee or their tea or their smoothie. You know, you can take what you already consume and, you know, elevate it, upgrade it to an elixir quite easily without, you don't have to like, another thing to do, another thing to add, you know, can't have this, gotta, you know, it's just easy, slip it in.
Well, one of the things that I used to make a lot of elixirs all the time. And so one of the things I used to do was I would say, okay, you know, I want a chaga and reishi, maca, whatever it was, all these superfoods. But what I would do is I would actually just make a little jar with all of that in there. So then when I was making my elixir, I just had my tea, put it in, whatever. Usually I'd have like coconut milk or something like that. Heat it up or have it cold. But I would have it prepared. And so what I love also about this book is that you could go through and, you know, find your favorite one, because it's gonna be hard to pick, but find your favorite one and batch those ingredients. Make it so that it's just part of your daily routine. Like you said, we grab the coffee, we grab the smoothie, we grab whatever it is in the morning. If you have this available, you just put it in, and it's going to bump you up for the rest of the day.
Totally.
So I do love this book very much. I have it. It's featured in my new teaching space right now because I can do whatever I want in my own teaching space. So, and then the last one that I want to talk about, because this is brand new. When did this come out now? Last year?
It's just over a year now, actually. So Chocolate Life.
Chocolate Life, brand new book about chocolate, cacao, flavor, function, feeling.
Again.
3 F's.
Yeah, for sure.
And I did, so Malcolm offered, so if you pre-bought the book, you could buy a package. And so I bought the package where you could do a chocolate tasting, and we did it online. He created a flavor wheel, and we 3 chocolates that we tried.
That's right.
Yeah, we did 3 chocolates, and we did it over Zoom, and it was so much fun.
Totally.
Because I'm usually the one doing the tasting, so I actually got to attend the tasting, and I loved it.
Oh, we had a great time.
Yes, we did. We had such a good time. And so in your store, of course, you have cocoa in all of its forms downstairs.
Beans, nibs, base powder, butter.
So people could come and they could make their own chocolate from scratch if they wanted to, or they could buy your amazing chocolates that you already have made downstairs. I will be picking up peanut butter cups before I leave today.
Okay.
Because they're so good.
Yeah.
Like, they're next level, these peanut butter cups. Don't buy Hershey's anymore, or Nestle, or whatever they're made out of.
Yeah, well, that's
I don't even know the Reese.
That's the idea of the upgrade, right? Like,
yes.
And you mentioned it, you know, like people want like that soul food, that nostalgic, you know, and my goal has been like, well, here it is, just done better, you know, in that sense.
Yes. And so again, with this book, the thing I love about this book is the recipes are nice and easy. You're not looking at 100 ingredients per recipe. And I think, you know, when we're looking at that home cooked, and the person that really wants to either wow their friends or do something fun on the weekend, this is the book for them.
Cool.
So, and was that, you know, when you were putting it together, were you thinking about like, what are people at home going to do? What are people at home going to want?
Yeah, and we actually pulled recipes from my house and, you know, what we were doing as a family. What my daughter's got a couple of recipes that she developed that she would make, you know, she'd be responsible for, kind of thing. We pulled some from the kitchen. So things that we were making kind of on a commercial level, like the peanut butter cups that everybody enjoyed. and then also kind of some of the bases of what I was teaching in the classes, for people to be their own chocolate makers.
Yes, I love it. So we're going to wrap up. Here's the things you need to know. The Light Cellar is in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
You can order online, and you ship where?
Anywhere in North America.
Anywhere in North America. We will put all the details for the store, the books, everything, and these 2 products that we talked about today. I'll put those in the bottom in the show notes as well.
Okay, right on.
Anything else you want to tell everybody?
Yeah, all right. Well, life is a wonderful journey. Food is necessary, but can be delicious, can be easy. I feel so good, I took some wrong turns and this and that with my diet, but finally figured it out. And
Yes.
it feels good. And it's a great journey, and it's a way to nourish yourself, to reconnect to who you are. And I encourage everybody to, be on that path. And if they want to connect with me further, go to lightcellar.ca. We have tons of free courses, online courses that you can tune into, watch lots of videos on YouTube. And then we have our live classes and event that people can join in person or tune in online.
Yes, I love it. And offering all the different ways for people to connect.
Yeah.
It's great because you can meet people in every way. And I love that. Mm-hmm. And then obviously for all of you, because I forgot to say this in the last podcast, if you can subscribe, like, and share, please do that because we really do appreciate it. So Malcolm, thank you for this today. It was such a good conversation.
Totally.
We will do this again. We'll talk about more things and have an amazing Tuesday.
All right.
Thanks.
Right on. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.